Hello and welcome to another episode of the Zelda Blind Review series, where I play all of the Zelda games for the very first time and then give my thoughts and opinions on them. Last time we checked out The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, a very important and influential game in the Zelda franchise, one that defined the identity of the series and set a new standard for what it meant to be a Zelda game. With a game as great and influential as A Link to the Past, which sold more than 4 million copies on the SNES and is regarded by many as the single greatest game for the system for many reasons that I've gone over in my video on it, it would only make sense that Nintendo would wish to port their most well-received title yet to their most successful console yet, the Game Boy. The handheld port for A Link to the Past began as an after-hours project at Nintendo, but quickly, the game grew into an original project, one still similar to, but different enough from the game that the staff team was originally trying to port. Many of the Link to the Past staff members reassembled for this new project, working for a little over a year and a half on the new title, before finally releasing it in Japan on June 6th, in America on August 6th, and in Europe on December 1st of 1993, under the title The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. Link's Awakening is quite an interesting little game. Like its predecessor, it was universally acclaimed upon its release, being regarded by many as the single greatest Game Boy title ever made. Anyways, let's start out with what we first see when booting up the game, the opening cutscene. Every time you boot up the game, you'll be shown this cute little cutscene. Link is sailing on his boat out on the open sea during a thunderstorm, when suddenly a lightning strikes his sail, causing the ship to burst into pieces. This part of the opening cutscene is hand-drawn and then pixelated, which I really like. It gives it a unique look. After that, we get the sequence that I played in the intro, where this girl who looks like Zelda finds Link, who's unconscious on the shore. Cue the title theme and voila, Link's Awakening. Pretty cute opening cutscene, quite in contrast to one from A Link to the Past. There you are told that the land of Hyrule is in danger, and that this evil wizard is kidnapping innocent women and using them in order to perform some ancient ritual, with the objective being to rescue Zelda and the other girls from acclaimed. Here, however, the objective is not immediately clear. Link just washed up on the shore of this island, and we are left to wonder what his fate will be. Now, you're probably super eager to see how the story unfolds, but before we look at the game itself, we're gonna take a look at the game's manual first. Just to say, there aren't many high-quality scans of this manual online, the ones that are in English at least. The highest quality English manual that I could find was this one on replacementdocs.com, so thank you to them for providing this high-quality scan. Following the trend of being similar to its predecessor, the manual for Link's Awakening is pretty similar to A Link to the Past as well, outright reusing many of the graphics seen in that manual. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, these graphics are pretty cool, and I really like the manual of A Link to the Past, so getting more graphics in this same art style, or even reusing the ones from the previous one, is fine by me. As for the introduction to the game, Link's Awakening went for the two-page spread-style story introduction that we've seen in the Zelda 1 manual, as opposed to the basic plot being spread across multiple pages like we've seen in the Zelda 2 and the Link to the Past manual. This makes sense though, since the story this time around is a lot simpler than in those two games, which were very much grand quests, with great stakes and big villains. This story is a lot simpler than those two, however, similarly to Zelda 1. In the basic plot summary, we are basically told what we've seen in the opening cutscene. After fulfilling the prophecy of the legendary hero of Hyrule and defeating the evil tyrant Ganon, Link went on a journey of enlightenment. During his trip back to Hyrule, Link's ship was struck by a lightning bolt, and he washed up on the shore of Koholint Island, an uncharted island in the middle of the vast sea. Link was rescued by a woman named Marin, who looks suspiciously similar to Princess Zelda, whom Link mistakes her for. Link learns of the giant egg on Mount Damaranch, the highest point of Koholint Island, inside of which a godlike deity known as the Windfish sleeps. During the search for his sword, Link encounters a talking owl, who tells him of the awakening, saying how once the Windfish awakens, all will be answered. And that's pretty much it. No grand story, no grand quest, just some directions on what you're supposed to do, hyping you up for the journey. The rest of the manual is, again, similar to A Link to the Past, filled with gameplay tips and whatnot. No bestiary this time around, however, which is kind of a bummer. Instead, at the end of this manual, we get these cute little images of Marin, Taran, and the Owl, with the in-game scenes featuring Old Man Ulrira, Mr. Wright, and Crazy Tracy, all characters that you will be seeing regularly on your quest. Another thing is that, just like in the previous manual, Link is never named, which I suppose is going to be a recurring trend throughout these games, but who knows. Anyways, before we begin with the review of the game itself, I just want to mention that today we will be covering the deluxe version of the game, released in 1998 and 1999 for the Game Boy Color. The reason for this is that the original version of Link's Awakening is pretty buggy, with some revisions of the game having quite a few oversights compared to the deluxe version. The deluxe release is overall better, with lots of bugs fixed, improvements added such as a new hint system in dungeons, an extra dungeon, a camera shop, and the game is also now in color, among a few other things. I think that the deluxe version is the better version of this title between the two, and in my opinion, an easy recommendation over the original. As for Link's Awakening Switch remake that was released in 2019, I think that this game is different enough from both the original Game Boy and the deluxe versions to deserve its own video, so we'll be covering it at a later date, most likely between the Breath of the Wild and the Tears of the Kingdom videos, since it came out between those two games. I'll talk a little bit about the Link's Awakening Switch remake and the original Game Boy release at the end of this video, however, just to point out some key differences between all of the releases, and in case you're debating on which version to play. You can skip to the timestamps shown on screen if you're just interested in that, but note that the full review of Link's Awakening Nintendo Switch will be coming at a later date. And with all of that out of the way, let's finally get into The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. The game starts off once again similarly to how A Link to the Past starts, with Link sleeping in his bed. Although, I guess it's not his bed, technically. This time, however, there is no telepathic message asking us to save a princess from a dungeon, but rather a princess waking us up instead. Or is it really a princess? Well, as it turns out, the person who woke us up isn't Princess Zelda, but rather a young lady named Marin, who happens to look a lot like her. Or maybe it's just Link seeing things. After getting out of the bed, you talk to Taran, Marin's father. Although, during my first playthrough, before I read the game's manual, I thought Taran was Marin's brother, since she keeps calling him Taran throughout the game, instead of, I don't know, father or dad or something. Surprisingly, Taran knows your name already. How? Well, he found your shield, on the back of which is written your name, because of course it is. I like how Link, the legendary hero of Hyrule and the wielder of the Master Sword, the guy who defeated a fucking demigod and saved the lives of so many people, has his name written on the back of his shield in case he loses it like a complete moron. Anyways, according to Marin and Taran, your sword is somewhere on the beach. Probably. And thus, you're given your first objective. Go to the beach and find your sword. After exiting Marin and Taran's house, you find yourself in Mabe Village, a small town with a few people living in it. Here, you can find a shop which sells some items such as bombs, hearts, a replacement shield, a deluxe shovel, a stupidly expensive bow, and arrows, which will all be available for purchase at different points in the game, but for now only the first 3 items that I mentioned will be up for sale. There's also another shop where you can play a crane minigame, where you can earn some rupees, hearts, bombs, a shield, and... Yoshi? There's also this couple in the village, with the mother asking you to give her baby the Yoshi doll found in the shop if you win it. We've also got some kind of telephone booth, and there are multiple of these found throughout the game. Here you can talk to Old Man Ulrira, who will give you a hint on what you're supposed to do next if you get stuck during the game. Ulrira actually lives in a house right next to this telephone booth, and if you enter it to talk to him, he'll refuse to talk to you since he's way too shy in person. We also have a fisherman who will let you fish for 10 rupees. You know this game is good when you can fish in it. There's also Lady Meow Meow who has a... Wait, is that a chain chomp from Mario? On the topic of Mario enemies, there are quite a few reused assets from other Nintendo properties in this game. Aside from the Yoshi doll and the chain chomps, we've also got piranha plants, Goombas, bloopers, boos, shy guys, pokies, cheap cheeps, thwomps, and even motherfucking Kirby. Like, my guy first appeared in a game that came out a year ago, and people are already putting him in their own games. Like, what do you guys think this is? Five Nights at Freddy's? Absolutely unacceptable. How could Nintendo ever do such a thing? I mean, even Taran looks like Mario, like what the hell, guys? Jokes aside, the reused enemies are a criticism that one may throw out there when talking about this game. I mean, there's that whole it's not really plagiarism if you're copying yourself deal, but one may see how the devs reused character designs from their previous games and call them lazy. I mean, this way the game has less original content, so that makes it less unique, right? Well, while I do agree that original enemies are better than reusing enemies from other franchises, even if they are your own franchises, I don't think it really takes away from the game or makes it less unique. Quite the contrary, actually. I think that this makes the game more unique in a way. Like, think about it. In what other Zelda title are you gonna see Goombas, you know what I mean? And quite a few of Link's Awakening fans online seem to really like the references to other Nintendo franchises in this game as well. Now then, let's continue with the story. On your way to the shore, you'll come across these two kids who are playing with a ball. The building next to the kids is a library, in which you can read some books containing some useful information. Or, well, more gameplay tips. There's also this book that's high up on the shelf that you can't reach, and also this book that has letters so small that you can't read them without a magnifying glass. This way, the game gives you some more objectives to work towards. Continuing south to the shore, you encounter some enemies that you have to avoid, since you still don't have your sword, and also these sea urchins that you can't seem to get past, since they're blocking your way, and they damage you and knock you back after you come in contact with them. The only way to get past them for now is to use your shield to push them out of the way. Making your way all the way to the shore, you can find your sword, but before you can pick it up, an owl flies in to greet you. It says that a courageous young lad, referring to you, has appeared, and that the monsters have recently started being more active, probably because of you. It says that you cannot leave the island until you awaken the windfish, and then it tells you to meet it in the mysterious forest located north of Mape Village. It then flies away, letting you pick up your sword, and from here, your adventure truly begins. You make your way to the mysterious forest where the owl told you to meet it. Here, your objective is to find the key to the first dungeon, which is located in this chest found in the forest. Your path to the chest is blocked by this raccoon, who casts a magic spell that teleports you to a different screen every time you try to get past him. In order to get past him, you need to collect a toadstool that you can find in the forest, and bring it over to this witch lady, who will make a magic powder for you. You need to use it on the raccoon, who will start flying across the screen before turning into... Tarin? After getting past the raccoon, you will be rewarded with the tail key, with which you can enter the first dungeon. But if you go back to Tarin's house before you go there, he's just casually sleeping like he wasn't a raccoon 2 minutes ago. Link's Awakening is full of moments like this. There's this quest that's required to beat the game called the trading sequence. It involves you giving an item to a particular NPC in the game, after which they will give you a different item, which you can then give to a different NPC in exchange for something else, and so on. This ultimately culminates in you obtaining the magnifying lens, which you can use on the book with the small text back at the library. During this trading sequence quest, there are quite a few goofy moments that happen. This trading sequence is pretty lengthy and confusing, and sometimes it really feels like you just have to know that you're supposed to give a certain item to a certain person. There are hints throughout the game though, and they help out a lot. I don't really mind the quest though, even though it was lengthy and even though it was kind of challenging finding the right person to give the item to every time, it ended up being a lot of fun. Before getting to the music, visuals and dungeons, I suppose we can talk about the other parts of the overworld. There's quite a lot of stuff in the overworld actually. Besides Mape Village, the mysterious forest and the beach/shore area, we also have the aforementioned Animal Village, Yarna Desert, the Face Shrine area, the rafting area, Ukuku Prayer, the cemetery, Mount Tamaranch, Catfish's Maw, and a few other smaller locations including the castle, an abandoned house, the Moblin's hideout, from which you actually have to rescue Bow Wow at one point, and the camera shop. The camera shop is something that was added in the deluxe version of the game. Here you can talk to this mouse guy who runs the shop, and he will take a total of 12 photos throughout your journey, with a lot of them being missable. It's just some extra content that you can enjoy if you want to, though it's entirely optional. You can even print them out if you have a Game Boy printer, which I don't, so I can't print out these beautiful photos, I guess. And also, this camera shop thing does lead to some funny interactions, like for example, if you steal from the shop, the mouse will actually take a photo of you, and now every character will call you thief in all caps for the rest of the game. Also, the shopkeeper will instantly kill you if you ever re-enter the shop. Wonderful. Anyways, here's all 13 possible photos that you can take. I like all of these goofy moments because they add a lot of personality to the game. The first 3 games were very serious when it came to their story, while this one is a lot more lighthearted and self-contained than those ones. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I love a good story with an overarching plot, but I can also enjoy a smaller, simpler story like this from time to time. This game is just full of charm, and that's what I love so much about it. It's a very distinctive entry in this franchise, and seeing how much content it borrows from other games, I find that absolutely remarkable. As for the music, the soundtrack has a lot of hits, with some misses here and there, though the hits really hit. This is entirely subjective, but this was really the first of these games where I was just jamming out to the music while playing, and I'm talking about the original soundtrack, not the remakes. It's really impressive how they managed to make the music sound so good on an 8-bit console. Overall, I like the soundtrack a lot, especially the Overworld theme and Mount Tamaranch's theme. Here, take a listen. Now, let's talk about the visuals. I'd say this game's art direction is somewhere between Zelda 1 and A Link to the Past. The sprites aren't as detailed as in A Link to the Past, but they also don't look as basic as in Zelda 1. You can best see this when comparing the three Link sprites next to each other. You can see how the game's art style is somewhere in between the two previously mentioned game's art styles. I find this one really cute, and I'd say even a little more appealing than the Link to the Past's art style, though that's entirely subjective. Link's Awakening's graphics are something that got criticized all the way back when it first released, mostly because of how the original Game Boy could only display like 2 colors, but I'd say the deluxe version looks really nice. Very vibrant, very chill, I like it a lot. Now then, with all of that out of the way, it's time to get into the dungeons. This time around, we have 8 dungeons, plus a final one which is basically just a boss fight. I really like them. Similar to A Link to the Past, the dungeons this time around all have some kind of a theme, though the earlier ones do blend in somewhat between each other when compared to the later dungeons, but that might just be me. The latter half of the dungeons were a lot more memorable in my opinion, though that might be because I completed the latter ones, well, later than the starting dungeons, so they're still fresh in my mind. And plus they're harder, so I suppose it felt like there was more stuff going on in them, and that led to me remembering them more. The puzzles from A Link to the Past are present here as well, pushing blocks, lifting pots, stepping on buttons, pressing colored switches to raise and lower barriers, traveling between floors, and a few others that I'm probably forgetting. We also have a few temporary items: the map, the compass, small keys, the big key, the medicine, and the stone beak. The map works in an interesting way in this game, where you can't actually see the map at all if you don't have the map item. You can only see Link's position in the dungeon, but not the dungeon itself, similarly to the first Zelda's Overworld map. The compass shows where the chests and the boss are located and will play a ringtone every time you enter a room that has a hidden key in it. Small keys open locked doors, and the big key opens the doors to the bosses, which are called nightmares in this game. The medicine works similar to the fairies in A Link to the Past. In that game, if you died but had a fairy trapped inside of a bottle, you would be revived on the spot. Here, you just recover all of your health if you die while you have the medicine, which persists after completing dungeons. You can also buy it for 42 rupees at Crazy Tracy's little shop. Why 42 rupees exactly? I don't know, probably because it's the weed number. The stone beak is something that was added in the deluxe version of the game. Throughout the dungeons, you can find these owl statues, and if you interact with them while you have the beak, they will give you a hint on how to get through the dungeon. There are also 2 temporary items that can be dropped by enemies, the Piece of Power and the Guardian Acorn, which will increase your damage and your defense for a short period of time, respectively. When it comes to the difficulty within the dungeons, I'd say it's pretty balanced, but the dungeons do have their fair share of crap. For example, Turtle Rock has this enemy that you've never seen before and have no idea how to fight against, placed right before obtaining the Fire Rod. If he hits you with one of these weaker attacks, you get knocked unconscious for a few seconds, and if you get hit with one of these long wind-up punches, you get knocked all the way back to the start of the level, which is so insanely annoying. I can't even begin to describe how infuriating this part was, as I fail and fail time and time and time again to get past this guy. The dungeons aren't really full of this stuff, but they do have some annoying enemies or gimmicks sometimes, but they don't take enjoyment away from the game. Turtle Rock in general was just not very fun in my opinion, because it has a ton of backtracking and it just doesn't feel fun to keep opening the menu and playing the ocarina over and over again. Eagle's Tower had an interesting mechanic with this ball that you have to carry around and throw at these pillars, but it just drags on for a bit too long, I feel like, though it's a pretty cool idea. All in all, while they do have some flack, I think the dungeons are pretty well made. Now, the items. When it comes to them, this game feels closer to Zelda 1 than A Link to the Past, with a much smaller pool of items, as well as how you use them. See, because the Game Boy has the same amount of buttons as the NES, the developers couldn't quite recreate the clean experience of A Link to the Past, where you had a dedicated button for the sword and the map, with the Pegasus shoes and the pickup mechanic sharing one button, and the items being used with the remaining button. Here, similarly to Zelda 1, you can switch out the active items and bind them to the A and B buttons however you see fit. You will almost always use the sword combined with another item, but sometimes you'll use different items to make a unique interaction. Almost all of the active items that appear in Link's Awakening also appear in A Link to the Past or Zelda 1, and they function pretty much in the same way as they did in either of those games, with the exception of the power bracelet now being a substitute for the pickup mechanic seen in A Link to the Past, as opposed to allowing you to push objects like in Zelda 1, which here you can do by default. As for the passive items, we have the 5 keys used to enter dungeons, the trading sequence items, the flippers, and also the legendary flying rooster. Oh my god, the legendary flying rooster. Once you acquire the level 2 power bracelet, you can push this weather pane located in Mabe Village to reveal a bird skeleton beneath it. In order to resurrect this bird skeleton, you actually need to play a song that you can learn for the ocarina. See, the fast travel this time around was moved from being tied to the ocarina to being tied to these warp points that you can find throughout the game. Instead, you can actually learn to play songs on the ocarina. This mechanic would later be a central mechanic in a later Zelda game, though I can't quite remember which game that is. There's 3 songs that you can learn to play on the ocarina. The first one is a song that you can learn from Marin, the second is the one you learn from Manbo, which allows you to teleport to a specific water pond next to Crazy Tracy's shop after playing it, and the third one is the one you can learn from these crocodile guys, which you can use to revive the turtle from Turtle Rock and the legendary flying rooster. And the flying rooster is so awesome. You can use the power bracelet to lift him above you, and he will be able to carry you over pits. Absolute legend. The rooster is only available until you enter and complete Dungeon 7 though, after which you will go to this house located on Mount Tamaranch and carry around this NPC who looks like Luigi around for the rest of the game. Oh, and I suppose I forgot to mention what the rock's feather does. It allows you to jump. That's it. All of the other items have the same properties as the ones from the previous games. Alright, it's time to talk about seashells. These are collectibles hidden throughout the game. There are a total of 26 of them, and you can leave them at the location known as the Seashell Mansion, located south of the castle. By collecting 20 seashells, you obtain the aforementioned level 2 sword, which is much more powerful than the level 1 sword. After obtaining it, all other seashells are turned into rupees instead. We also have the heart containers and the heart pieces. You're rewarded with a heart container every time you defeat a boss, and collecting 4 heart pieces will create a full heart container, increasing your health by 1 heart, up to a maximum of 14. The last collectibles to mention are the blue and red mails, which you can find in the Collar Dungeon, introduced in the Deluxe version of the game. Remember that book on the shelf that we couldn't reach back in the library? Well, if you charge into the shelf, the book will fall on the floor, and you'll be able to read it. It will display a code, which you can use at the cemetery by moving these gravestones in a particular order, after which the entrance to the dungeon will open. Beating the dungeon will reward you with either a blue or red mail, which will increase your defense or the amount of damage you deal respectively. Now then, it's time for the bosses. Honestly, they aren't really as memorable this time around, and feel more like larger enemies than actual bosses in my opinion. Well, maybe not all of them, but some certainly do. Some mini-bosses in this game, like this giant skeleton and Catfish's Maw, feel more like bosses than some of the actual bosses. Maybe that's just me, but I thought the bosses from Adventure of Link and A Link to the Past were a lot more memorable than these guys. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree. There isn't really much to say about them, since I genuinely don't even remember most of them. The slime meal from Dungeon 5 was cool and interesting. The Dungeon 6 boss Facade being a face in the ground was really cool. Dungeon 7 being this fight on top of a tower against the evil eagle was really dope, even if a bit frustrating to fight sometimes. But then some of these were just lame, like Hadrosaur, this octopus mini-boss from Dungeon 4 that just goes in a circle, or Anglerfish, the actual boss from Dungeon 4 that you beat by spamming your sword, or Hothead, the boss of Dungeon 8 that you defeat by spamming the fire rod, which you can do this time around since there is no magic meter in this game. Really ramping up the difficulty right before the ending, aren't we? There's the Moldorm copy from A Link to the Past as the boss of the first dungeon this time around. This fight wasn't fun in that game, but here, since you can just jump over him, he's actually kinda okay, even if a bit underwhelming, and there's still the annoying pits. There's the genie guy in Dungeon 2, where you have to pick up his bottle and smash it on the ground 3 times to break it, and it just takes forever and is really just not fun to fight this guy. The boss of Dungeon 3 is this slime thing called Slime Eye that you have to charge into, but he doesn't work properly half the time and again, isn't that interesting. The order of all of these was kinda jumbled up, but that's just kinda how these guys came to my mind, I suppose. I think Link's Awakening is very much one of those it gets good after X hours kinda game, where it starts off kinda weak, being pretty much a parody of A Link to the Past, but over time it grows into its own thing, and gets really interesting by the time you get to the halfway point. Speaking of halfway points, this is when the story also gets a lot more interesting. But see, I've purposefully avoided talking about the story as much as I could up until this point, because the story of this game is something truly unique, and it has a lot of twists, surprises, and is actually quite emotional. If you've never played Link's Awakening, but have been thinking about playing it, I hope that the gameplay mechanics and features that I've talked about thus far have interested you enough to play it for yourself. If there is a game from these 4 classic Zelda games that came out before Ocarina of Time that you should play, I would say it's this one. This game isn't perfect, and I would say that A Link to the Past is a lot better as a game, but it is a story that is definitely worth experiencing blind, and I highly recommend you play it for yourself. Normally, I'm really against subscription-based services, like, I really hate them, but $4 for a month of Switch Online will allow you to experience this game in probably the best way possible. As for the remake, I think that this is probably the definitive version of this game. It's more streamlined than Deluxe, with better graphics, menus, refined controls, being able to teleport to multiple different warp points via the Ocarina, the music being reimagined incredibly well, though I myself prefer the original's OST, and it has a slew of other features that the original NGBC version don't have, though it removes the camera shop in exchange for a dungeon builder. Now, do be warned, this is a $60 game that has around 10 to 20 hours of content depending on how fast you get through the game. I actually beat it in under 10, but for a first time playthrough, I'd say it takes around 10 to maybe 15 hours to complete it, and probably longer for 100%, which I haven't done actually. Nothing against Grezzo, by the way, like, this is my first game from them, so I don't know if they're hated in the Zelda community or not, but I think they did a great job with this remake. I think it's faithful enough to the original, but also different enough to call itself its own game, though that may just be me, so take what I said with a grain of salt. Do note that the Switch remake does lag sometimes. I've noticed the frame rate getting really choppy when loading in the Overworld especially, though it doesn't ruin the game in my opinion. I hope that helps you decide whether you want to play this game or not, and if you want to, which version you'd like to play. Expect a video on the remake at a later date, like I said. Anyways, with all of that out of the way, this is your final spoiler warning. From here on out, I'll be spoiling the entire story, so leave if you care about that. Still here? Okay then. Here is why I love Link's Awakening so much. During your many adventures and misadventures on Koholint Island, you'll talk to Marin quite a few times. She will even share her Ballad of the Windfish with you, a song that she loves dearly and sings to her friends and family, which you can then learn to play on the Ocarina. At some point, your way to the Yarna Desert will be blocked by this big sleeping walrus. The only way to wake him up is to get little Marin to sing her song in front of him. You find Marin sitting on a bench next to the shore near Mabe Village, which will then trigger a cutscene where she and Link have a talk. Well, I say talk, but you know, Link doesn't speak. To quote the dialogue, or rather, monologue here, I wonder where these coconut trees come from. Taran says there is nothing beyond the sea, but I believe there must be something over there. When I discovered you, Link, my heart skipped a beat. I thought this person has come to give us a message. If I was a seagull, I would fly as far as I could. I would fly to faraway places and sing for many people. If I wish to the windfish, I wonder if my dream will come true. After completing the cutscene, the game will give you Marin as your companion, asking if this is your big chance, and she will follow you until you get her to sing her song to the walrus. See, throughout the game, Marin develops a crush on Link. She starts off kind of sheltered and cold, but over time really warms up to him, and one could even say that she develops a crush on him, which I think is really cute. We can't know for certain, but we can assume that Link also has a bit of a crush on Marin. There is also this cute little scene where Link saves Marin, who's trapped on this bridge, and she's about to confess to him, but Taran interrupts her. She then runs off, and that's the last time we see her before the end of the game. The owl then flies in, saying how Maren tried to sing her a Ballad of the Windfish in front of the Windfish's egg, located at the top of Mount Amaranch. The Ballad of the Windfish is the Song of the Awakening, according to the owl. Throughout the game, the owl keeps urging you to continue moving forward, calling you the Messenger of the Awakening repeatedly throughout the game. The Awakening is an event that keeps getting mentioned by the owl over and over again. This mysterious deity called the Windfish must be awakened in order for Link to leave the island. During your trip to the Southern Face Shrine, you find this ancient scripture stating that the dream can only be ended by the Messenger of the Awakening. Here's what is so gut-punching about this story. Maren, Taren, Ulrira, Bow Wow, the mouse cameraman, the owl, even Koholint itself, none of them exist. They are fabrications of reality, entities that exist only in the dream of the Windfish, this godlike deity who has been asleep for God knows how long, and inside of whose dream Link ended up getting himself in somehow. Upon exiting the Southern Face Shrine, the owl tries to comfort Link, saying that the truth may not be what it seems. Just like how you cannot know what treasure a chest holds, if any at all, until you open it, you cannot know if Koholint is but a dream until you awaken. But we know what the truth is, and it's such a sad reality. This place that you've fallen in love with is nothing more than an illusion, a fake reality, a fake world with fake people, fake locations, fake enemies, and a fake god. Here's the thing, right? Kind of off topic, but hear me out. Link's awakening in Japan is called Yumeo Mirushima, meaning the Dreaming Island, and that just really spoils the game in my opinion. The fact that Koholint is a dream is such a cool but at the same time scary reveal, and also a bold one, and with this title, you just get spoiled basically. It's why I like the title Link's Awakening so much, because it's a lot more ambiguous than the Japanese one. Awakening can mean a lot of different things, but it's rarely used in the literal sense of the word, to wake someone up. It's often used to describe someone awakening their true potential, which is what I thought the game would be about. And this dream reveal thing is just so surprising, and I love it. What was the point of this segment, you may ask? Well, it was just for me to gush about how cool the title for this game is. Anyways, enough ranting about the title for some game, let's get to the finale of this bad boy. After beating each boss, you will obtain one of the 8 instruments of the sirens found in Koholint, and you then have to play the Ballad of the Windfish on the ocarina in front of the Windfish's egg, which will then play all of the 8 instruments for you. Then, the egg opens up, and you can enter inside, falling down to the center of the mountain. Here you are presented with 3 hallways in front of you. Remember the magnifying glass and the book at the beginning of the game? Well, in that book there is a secret code, being a different one for each save file. You have to move through the hallways of the egg in the specific way that's presented to you in the book, after which you will arrive in the room containing the final boss. This is a shape-shifting nightmare, taking on the appearance of many of Link's past enemies, which include the bosses from this game, as well as Acclaimed and Ganon, which is an insanely cool nod to the fact that this game takes place after A Link to the Past. This fight is kind of difficult actually, especially the final part of it, where you have this giant eye with these 2 tendrils swinging around, and you have to hit it by firing it with your bow. Alternatively, you can use Boomerang, which is insanely strong in this game, being able to one-shot most enemies, as well as stunning the ones it can't deal damage to. As for this boss, it also one-shots it, so yeah. I like how all of the games I've talked about so far on the channel have some kind of exploit that you can use to make the final boss insanely easy. If you're fighting this one legitimately like I did though, this one gets easier with every playthrough, but it is still a bit frustrating, though it is a great send-off for the game. After defeating Deathel, the final nightmare, a staircase pops up. Link climbs up it, and the owl greets him, referring to him by his name for the first time. The owl says that he is the spirit of the Windfish, and that these nightmares have invaded the Windfish's dreams, never allowing it to wake up. Thanks to Link, however, the Windfish is finally free, and he can finally awaken. The owl disappears, and the Windfish appears, though it looks more like a whale. The Windfish thanks Link for ridding its dreams of the nightmares, and invites him to play the Ballad of the Windfish one last time. Link plays the song with the 8 instruments, and we watch everything disappear. Link is then launched upwards via a geyser into the sky, after which he wakes up in the middle of the sea. Was it all a dream? How long was he out for? Was any of what he had gone through real? Well, as it turns out, yes. Link looks up in the sky, seeing the windfish soaring through the heavens. We don't know how Link gets back to Hyrule from this point, but one thing is certain. While Koholint may not have been real, the memories of it were. And as the dream island of Koholint ceased to exist in Link's dreams, it now exists eternally in his heart. And that concludes The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. A very interesting title, especially considering how Hyrule, Ganon and even Zelda don't appear in it whatsoever. To rank it in the tier list is a tough choice. On one hand, I love Link's Awakening so much. This story left quite an impression on me, much more than A Link to the Past did. It's a really emotional tale of opposites. Happiness and sadness, joy and misery, life and death, dreams and nightmares. And it's a story that resonates quite a lot with me. It's definitely not a perfect game, but it is a really fun and enjoyable one. Do I think it's better than Zelda 1? Definitely. Do I think it's as good as A Link to the Past though? Not necessarily. This is a really tough choice, but I think I will put it in the incredible tier, but below A Link to the Past, for now. But just like I said in my video on A Link to the Past, this is subject to change, and I may enjoy it a lot more at some point when I end up revisiting it. Also, if you beat the game with 0 deaths, you get one final screen of Marin singing. Absolutely beautiful. And she also turns into a seagull, like she wanted to. Also, I beat the remake with 1 single death because I died in the mobless hideout like a dumbass and thus didn't get to experience the secret ending in the remake, and now I'm pissed. 0 out of 10 game. In the end, I have to say, of all the Zelda games I've played up until now, this being the 4th one, this is definitely my favorite one, mostly because of its story and soundtrack. By the time I finished it for the first time, it became one of my favorite games of all time, and that hasn't changed even after 4 different playthroughs in such a short amount of time. This game has such an incredibly powerful message. Yes, the good times that we've spent with the people we love will one day come to an end, so we should cherish the time we have left with them while we still can. And even when those good times come to an end one day, we should be happy that we got to spend the time we did with them. It's the ultimate message of don't be sad because it's over, smile because it happened. And that is why I love The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. Alright, before ending the video, I just want to mention a few plans that I have. First of all, I want to apologize for the long gap between this video and the last one. First, I went on a 7-day vacation right after uploading the Link to the Past video, and after that, I was experiencing some crazy storms that were absolutely destroying my backyard. Like, I'm talking the roof of my shed was torn off, with half of it hitting my fence and destroying it, and the other half flying away. Some roof tiles were also carried away by the wind, and I also didn't have power, water or internet for a few days. So basically the video was delayed because of some unpredicted occurrences. I asked you if you wanted me to cover the Link to the Past mangas, the Zelda comics, TV show and the CDI games in the Link to the Past video. And from the response I got, it seems most people want to see the Link to the Past mangas getting covered, while there was a lot less of a demand for the comics and the TV show and the CDI games. So here's what I'm gonna do. The next 3 videos will be me covering the Link to the Past manga by Shotaro Ishinomori, the Triforce of the Gods manga by Ataru Kajiba, and the Dream Island manga also by Ataru Kajiba. I'm not gonna cover the Link to the Past manga by Akira Himekawa, however, since that one came out over a decade after these other 3, so we'll cover it somewhere around the 4 Swords videos released, though this one came out after the Minish Cap was released, but we can make an exception for that one. But yeah, expect that one around then. And if those videos perform well, or if I end up having fun making them, I'll do this for all of the Himekawa manga. As for the comics, the TV show and the CDI games, those are gonna have to wait as well. The manga videos are gonna be relatively short. I'll try to keep them between 15 to 20 minutes in length, since the game we're gonna be covering after those videos are done is gonna have a pretty lengthy review. And I have some real life things going on that will be keeping me somewhat busy for the next month or so I don't wanna have the channel completely die before I release the Ocarina of Time video. Speaking of Ocarina of Time, I was thinking of live streaming my first playthrough of it, so I'll have a poll up on the channel after this video goes up asking if you'd be interested in that, so be sure to let me know what you think about that idea in that poll. One final thing I want to say is thank you for 1000 subscribers. I really didn't expect that we'd reach that goal so soon, but hey, here we are. Thank you for watching these silly little videos of mine. And hey, if you're new around here, maybe consider subscribing and liking the video, or commenting your thoughts and opinions on the review. Do you like Link's Awakening? Do you dislike it? Have I given the game a fair analysis? How can I improve these videos? I hope to hear your thoughts down below. In conclusion, after I'm done with the manga videos, I'll make a video on Ocarina of Time, so stay tuned for that. That concludes the video. My name is Cam, thank you for watching, and I'll hopefully see you next time.